On May 20th, it marks the beginning of the invasion of the remaining French resistance. The Panzers had taken the city of Abbeville, and the reason for taking the city was that the Germans' panzers could draw on city supplies to replenish their own dwindling stock. In doing this, the Allied army was now split into two. Gamelin had come up with a brilliant plan for the western half of the army to circle around the Germans and attack them from the largely undefended southern end of the army. Unfortunately for the French, Gamelin was replaced on that day by General Weygand, and General Weygand spent 3 days at the front taking stock and coming up with a new plan, and opportunity to strike back at the Germans was lost. On this day, May 21st, Guderian paused at the Somme line. The German High Command was still debating whether to move forward and capture the ports of France or reverse their path and deal with the intact part of the French army south of the Somme. Guderian believed they should deal with the armies south of them because of their new vulnerability to attacks coming from the rear. The BEF, the British Expeditionary Force, now attacked Arras, a major city but well suited for further attacks on the rest of France. While the Germans had ultimately failed, it convinced the German High Command that an attack from the Allies would soon follow. On May 22nd, the German command now agreed to move forward to capture the French ports. They now faced the first legitimate threat of the invasion of France at the outer edge of the city of Boulogne. They encountered a veteran garrison of French troops. This garrison was able to hold back the strength of the entire German army for 3 days before surrendering on the 25th of May. On the same day, the BEF felt in imminent danger that France was going to crumble. The BEF in Belgium pulled out and entered the French city of Lille. Their leader, Lord Gort, set up different garrisons of his forces along the coast and essentially created a British line. May 23rd. The invasion was starting to cost the German army. Commander Kleist of the 7th of the Panzers reported he had already lost half of his tanks. Runselt, a general of the German forces, commanded that the German army be split into two. Runselt would command Army Group A, which would attack the city of Calais, and the other half of the army, which is Group B, would defend the rear of the army group in the case of an Allied attack. Stop. This was an extremely pivotal day for the German campaign. The French city, Calais, had been blockaded, leaving only one Allied-controlled port in France, which is Dunkirk. The BEF was caught up trying to hold up their line running from Arras to the coast, but the line was breaking. Hitler felt no further threat from the Allied forces in France, when Rundstedt suggested that the BEF should be left to the infantry and the Luftwaffe, which was the German Air Force. Hitler immediately agreed, feeling no need to waste further artillery or ammo. This laid the seeds for the miraculous evacuation from Dunkirk.
May 25th. Lord Gort, commander of the BEF, is still under orders to attack the south to support the French troops. But as time went on, it became clear that this order would risk losing the entire army. With this knowledge, he made a very courageous decision, ordering the 5th and 50th Divisions of his army to move from Arras, the southern end of the British pocket, to the north to help the 2nd Corps. This would be his first attempt to head out to sea. The now stronger and larger 2nd Corps' job would be to hold the northern flank by the sea if the Belgian army surrendered. Also on this day, Churchill, the British Prime Minister, made its final decision of not evacuating the garrison defending the city of Calais. He did this in hopes of gaining more time to improve western defenses of Dunkirk's beachhead. The fighting in this city continued until late the next day, holding up one Panzer division.
By the 26th of May, the British and French formed a beachhead around Dunkirk, however both for different reasons. The British hoped to escape the Germans, while the French still hoped to fight on. This caused a problem. First, let's backtrack to how and why this beachhead began. On this day, Lord Gort and General Blanchard, the 1st Army Group commander, met and together created plans to assemble a defensive perimeter around Dunkirk. The French were to defend the line from Gravelines to Brigades, the British from Brigades along the canal to Furnes, then Newport and the sea. Also on this day, the German began to notice activity at Dunkirk. Because of this, Hitler lifted the halt order he issued, allowing his armored group to advance within artillery range of Dunkirk. Finally, on this day, the defense at Calais city ended. On this day, the German advance finally brought the port within artillery range, and for the rest of the time the town of Dunkirk suffered from constant heavy artillery bombardment. At this time, the Allies had defenses around Dunkirk, one of the most important being the inundations, a part of the Allied troops which flooded large areas of the low-lying ground around the port so as to destroy area for a tank ditch. However, just by doing this, the BEF wasn't safe. The 2nd Corps did not leave the frontier defenses until the 27th through the 28th of May, and still most of the BEF troops were at the perimeter of Dunkirk at the end of the day. More worse than this happening was the fact that the German 6th Army reported that a Belgian delegation arrived to request surrender negotiations. May 28th. This day was a crisis for Lord Gort. This is because Belgium signed an unconditional surrender, leaving the northern flank of Allied soldiers and troops exposed to German attack. Lord Gort was only given 1 hour notice of the surrender. This destroyed his hope of evacuating his troops. Stuck in a terrible position, Lord Gort had to leave his troops at the defense of Dunkirk. To help his Allied troops was the BEF. The BEF troops managed to hold off German troops from crossing the Yser and reaching the beaches before the Allies. The second crisis for Lord Gort came during a meeting with General Blanchard. Only now did the French commander realize that the British were planning to evacuate their troops. Lord Gort made it clear that he did not believe any evacuation was possible. He refused to retire with the British.
May 29th, the Germans finally cut off Allied troops fighting around Lee. 4 British divisions managed to escape the trap, but the French 5th Corps was captured. By the end of the day, most of the BEF reached Dunkirk. Dan from the harbor. The loss of 2 destroyers in sea on May 29th convinced Admiralty to withdraw all modern destroyer ships from evacuation. Luckily, Rear Admiral Wake Walker arrived to take over at Dunkirk for the Allies. Upon realizing his disadvantage of having only 15 old destroyers, he contacted Admiral Ramsey, who contacted Admiralty to return 7 modern destroyers to Dunkirk. Although lacking all of the destroyers, This day was the most successful by far. 7 of the old destroyers rescued around 1,000 men from the oil-filled, clouded, and destroyed beaches of Dunkirk. It is important to note that the oil and clouds gathered around the beach blocked the German army from being able to spot Dunkirk and thus prevented them from attacking the Allies. This made the evacuation of so many troops possible. To help evacuate these troops, small ships gathered and transported men from shore to larger ships offshore. May 31st. This day was not a good day for evacuations. There was a great deal of smoke in the air from the shells that had landed on the island. It was also really humid and the air was extremely thick. For the majority of the day, the beach was not able to be used and it was hard to get ships close to the beach. Most of the soldiers that were evacuated had to wade deep into the water to reach the ships, while they were being shot at by German machine guns from their outposts far above. Even though there were those complications, a total of 68,014 men were evacuated. By the end of the day, the number of British troops at Dunkirk had been reduced to a point where a corps commander could take over. On May 31st, General Brooke and Lord Gort returned to Britain and commanded the troops at Dunkirk was passed on to General Alexander.
Okay, June 1st. On June 1st, the second highest number of men were evacuated from Dunkirk. Alone on the Solent steamer Whippingham, 2,700 people were evacuated. On this day, 4 destroyers were also sunk, including Admiral Wake Walker's HMS Keith. By the end of the day, only part of the British I Corps and the French troops guarding the perimeter remained at Dunkirk. June 2nd. Both the French and British governments hoped and planned that the evacuations from Dunkirk would be done by June 2nd. However, this was not the case. There were still 6,000 British and 65,000 French troops left in Dunkirk. A final effort was planned in order to save the troops, and Allied ships started moving to Dunkirk at around 5 p.m. By midnight, the last of the British rearguards had been rescued from Dunkirk. June 3rd. The big effort made by the Allies on the previous day had saved 27,746 troops from Dunkirk, with most of them being from the harbor. Even though 75% of the troops that were rescued on the previous day were French, it was estimated that there were still 30,000 to 40,000 French soldiers on the shores of Dunkirk. One final effort was made to rescue these men from the perimeter at Dunkirk. At 10:15 p.m., the destroyer HMS Whitshed became the first of many ships to take part in this evacuation of the distressed French soldiers. June 4th. The final operation to rescue the troops from Dunkirk continued until 3:40 a.m., when the old destroyer Shikari, carrying 383 troops, became the last ship to leave Dunkirk. On the night of the 3rd, going into the early morning of June 4th, a total of 26,175 French troops were rescued from Dunkirk harbor. Operation Dynamo officially ended at 2:23 p.m. on June 4th. The Allies took heavy losses during this operation. The British Expeditionary Force, or the BEF, lost 68,111 killed, wounded, or taken prisoner, 2,472 guns, 63,879 vehicles, 20,548 motorcycles, and 500,000 tons of stores and ammunition during the evacuation, while the Royal Air Force, or the RAF, lost 106 aircraft during the fighting. Recovered German intel says that around 80,000 men were captured around Dunkirk, while other sources of intel say that as low as 40,000 troops were taken prisoner. At least 243 ships were sunk, including 6 Royal Navy destroyers, with another 19 suffering damage.
Nice.